So, and what Steiner says about him, which is him being roped into psychoanalysis in general, and the problems he sees with it, has to do with the materialistic part, as you said. Steiner also mentions this, that Jung has the courage and somehow is the only one, really, I think he even puts it this way, the only one within this, what he sees at the time as like, you know, a movement or this field, who has the courage to go further. But he says that Jung is always trying to, no, he doesn't say try to, he says Jung has to conform or operate within the assumptions of the present. And by that he means what you just said, that he has to take a kind of position as an atheist in order to operate within what Steiner says, the assumptions of the present. And he mentions the university environment as well, so, and modern science. So he means the academy at that time. I mean, still basically that. It's a little bit different now, but in order to function within the academy, the assumption in a scientific way, the assumption is a kind of materialistic atheistic assumption. We could argue about that, but to some degree, that's what it is in order to build, to move forward in that. And so he does say that Jung has this courage to go further, but he's always like doing it within these assumptions, sticking within these assumptions. So therefore, yeah, being a materialist, in other words, or being too reductive about these things.
Right. Well, I often think about Jung as kind of a smuggler. He's sort of smuggling in concepts and esoteric ideas and Christian ideas, and then he uses science of the time, finds a language to speak about. So he was really a bridge maker in that sense, while it seems like it was maybe easier from the position from Steiner to be fully expressing his viewpoint. I wonder what Steiner would have thought about the Red Book.
I think if Steiner had seen the Red Book, he would have definitely had a different lecture series saying new things about it. Because what he's reading is not at the time from Jung is not anything like the Red Book. Jung never talks about Steiner in published print. However, he does say some things in some letters. He knows lots of theosophists and anthroposophists. He's basically saying it's not scientific, that they're just making assertions about some spiritual experiences they have. It's kind of like a critique we get of New Age today. Like, you had some experience and you're just asserting what you say this experience it is, but you're not like providing me with any evidence. In this case, evidence could even be, I don't know, like a rational framework within to think about it, or how to think about it, or because Jung is now criticized for many of the same things, actually.
Is there something to his critique, or you feel like it's just that he hasn't read it?
Well, I think both. I think there is something to it, but I think that also it's a bit of an outside, it's a bit uninformed at the same time. Be if I think about Jung, and if Jung is receiving patients who are theosophists and anthroposophists, he might be basing a lot of it off what he sees them saying and going through, and that was one thought that I have, that if they're telling him all kinds of experiences they've had, and he's listening to this, he could be forming his impression partly on what he hears from them, which would be different than, going to a Steiner lecture or reading intensely several Steiner books, which I don't think he did, something like that. I think it was more like people would recommend Steiner to him, and he would look at it a little bit, but be repelled somehow. This is the impression that I got. And but he, like in this one, he just says, I know a lot of anthroposophists, or I'm in connection with a lot of anthroposophists and theosophists. So that's why I wonder if some of these were also his patients, because the two scenes overlap heavily, right?
It's also used to say that Jung is very critically remarked. He was on Kierkegaard, which I don't think he read, but he's very critical of. And quickly sort of judging and putting to the side. And this sort of leads me into what I think could be sort of a main theme for our discussion, and that is this concept of the doppelgänger, or the shadow, because in a way, these two characters, Steiner and Jung, they're so close. They're not doppelgängers, but there's something in their lives, in their psyche, they're living at around the same time, and that makes me think that this would be interesting to explore these two as sort of shadows of each other, in a sense.
While there are many overlaps, there is a crucial potential difference just to at least think about, because perhaps we could figure out ways to bridge the gap. And it does come down to as far as I can tell, especially what Steiner says in these lectures, that it comes down to the objective given existence of these things, or versus their symbolic or purely projection or purely like mental reality.
I think in this question of Jung's understanding of symbols, that's the way he expresses himself as his persona in his professional texts. If one reads the personal Jung, it's clearly not a symbol. He believed this stuff is real. Psyche is real, or ghosts are real. He had experiences of them. So I think on a private, personal level, or if you look at the Red Book, the dead are real. It's not a concept. But he was again a smuggler, or he was working very hard on trying to make science, the psychology of things that were outside of that realm. So, and having said that, I do think at times it sounds really like he's just reducing. For example, we can take something that we've been talking a lot about in the podcast is his interpretation of Christ, speaking about the Christ image or Christ as an archetype, or sometimes it becomes a little bit close to reductionism. But I think if one look at Jung's own life and where his theory came from, it was really based on experience. His dissertation was on the occult phenomena, and it was a medium, his cousin, that he followed seances of. He was always trying to translate it to a general audience, but in my understanding, he believed these forces are real.
Right.
They're not just projections. But he would also say there are many of them that are projections.
Yeah.
And then part of the work of individuation or psychological development is differentiating. What are the real ghosts and what are the ghosts of your parents?
Your own ghosts, right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the sad part about it is I think that that's also in a lot of ways what Steiner claimed to be wanting to do, make a science in order to be able to study and reveal and to replicate like spiritual experiences and as a way of understanding them. So he also has a similar project about scientific validity, bringing scientific validity to the reality of the spiritual world. So in a funny way, that's something is missed there because they're both having a similar goal. They both want to bring science and spirituality together somehow. Like they're both working on this project. And so part of it could just be that they're both only seeing the outside of the other, and neither was able, especially if Jung is doing what he had to do, and that there wasn't able to for there to be an encounter in which they got to see the private Jung or talk to the more private Jung. The Red Book is the private Jung, in my opinion. So that was, and that was all secret, and he didn't come out until recently, even. So something about that is unfortunate part of this like kind of missed opportunity, I think. Because I agree,
No, please.
Well, because I agree that they have more in common and more similarities than either side realized. But if we come back to this idea of the doppelganger, maybe we could explore it through this as well. Here's the unfortunate part, that both sides of this are working on a framework in which to talk about an experience, a phenomenon that is spiritual in some capacity.